I found the phone behind a paint can in the garage. Not a can of paint that had been used recently. An old one, the color we had used on the back bedroom 4 years ago, sitting on the shelf with the other forgotten things that accumulate in a garage over 15 years of marriage. I was looking for a screwdriver. I moved the can. There was a phone. Not my phone. Not a phone I recognized. A prepaid phone, no case, with a lock screen I could not get through, sitting behind a can of 4-year-old paint in a garage where I had been the person who mostly used the garage. I held it for a moment. Then I put it back exactly where I had found it. Then I found my screwdriver. Then I fixed whatever I had been fixing. Then I sat down and I thought about what I had found. Welcome. My name is Stephen. I am 50 years old. I have been a civil litigator for 23 years. I understand evidence. I understand documentation. I understand chains of custody and the weight that different kinds of proof carry in different contexts. I was married for 18 years to a woman named Amy. We have 2 sons, 17 and 15. And I found a phone in my garage that I knew the moment I found it was not there by accident. A prepaid phone is a specific choice. It is chosen precisely because it does not associate with a name, a billing address, or an account that appears on financial statements. It is chosen by people who need to communicate without a record. In my professional life, I have encountered prepaid phones in divorces and fraud cases and a handful of criminal matters. I know what they mean when they appear. I put the phone back. I thought about this for a day. The following evening, after Amy and the boys were asleep, I went back to the garage. I moved the paint can. I took the phone. I charged it with a cable I had purchased that afternoon at a drugstore. When it powered on, it asked for a PIN. I did not have the PIN. What I had was the phone itself, and the fact of its existence, and the specific architecture of what its existence implied. I have been a litigator for 23 years. I know how to build a case. I spent 3 weeks building mine. I did not need the phone's contents. The phone was one piece of evidence among several that I assembled over those 3 weeks. Call logs from our carrier, the regular phone, the one I could access, showed a number that appeared consistently on evenings when Amy was home, but the calls were brief. The kind of calls that are endings and confirmations rather than conversations. Brief because the conversation had to happen elsewhere. The number was associated with a man named David. He was 46. He worked in marketing. He had attended the same professional networking events as Amy, who worked in communications. They would have met easily and naturally. The relationship had been ongoing based on what I could reconstruct for approximately 22 months. I put the phone back in the garage before Amy found it missing. I did not need it. I had everything I needed from other sources. I called my partner at the law firm first, not for legal representation because he does not practice family law, but because he is the person I trust with professional thinking. I described what I had found and what I had built. He said, "Stephen, have you talked to a family attorney?" I said. "Not yet." He said, "Talk to one today. You are too close to this to be your own counsel." He was right. I called Margaret Chen that afternoon. She had practiced family law for 22 years, and she said when I described finding the phone, a prepaid phone behind a paint can, she paused. "That is not the action of someone who is uncertain about what they are doing. That is the action of someone who has thought carefully about concealment." I said, "Yes." She said, "How much have you already documented?" I said. 3 weeks of work. Call logs, financial records, a timeline. She said, "You're a litigator." I said, "Yes." She said, "I want you to give me everything you have, and I want you to stop building it yourself. From this point forward, this is my case, not yours." I handed it over. It was harder than I expected. Handing a case to someone else goes against 23 years of professional instinct. But Margaret was right that I was too close to it, and she was right that she needed to be the one managing the documentation from that point forward. The confrontation happened 3 weeks later after Margaret had reviewed everything and given me a clear picture of where I stood legally. I told Amy what I had found. I told her about the phone. I told her about the call logs. I told her I had been working with an attorney for 3 weeks, and that I had a complete financial picture and a legal plan. She was quiet for a long time. She said, "The phone." I said, "The phone." She said, "How did you find it?" I said, "I was looking for a screwdriver." She closed her eyes. She said, "Of all the things." I said, "Yes." She said, "How long have you known?" I said, 3 weeks of knowing. 22 months of not knowing. She said, "Stephen," I said, "Amy, I need to know what you want to do. Save the marriage or end it. I need that answer because we have 2 sons and 18 years, and this has to be handled with the care that those things deserve." She said, "I don't know if the marriage can be saved." I said, "Then we need to find out together, and we need to do it quickly because the longer we stay in this position, the harder it is for everyone." We tried counseling for 3 months. We worked at it genuinely. We were honest in the sessions in a way we had not been honest with each other before, which is the specific irony of couples counseling in situations like this. The crisis creates the honesty that the marriage needed earlier. The honesty was not enough to save what had been damaged, but it was enough to build a foundation for ending things with less destruction than we might have otherwise. The divorce took 14 months. Margaret was thorough. The settlement accounted for the full picture. My boys are doing well in the specific ongoing way of teenagers who are being told truth in increments appropriate to their ages. The 17-year-old processes things analytically like me. The 15-year-old processes things relationally, which is probably healthier. The phone is gone. I disposed of it after the legal proceedings concluded there was no need for it, and I did not want it in my house. But I think about it occasionally. The specific choice of putting it behind that particular paint can in that particular spot in a garage, where I would mostly have been the one to find it. A careful person's blind spot. I found the phone. I found the screwdriver. I fixed what I had been trying to fix. Some things are easier to repair than others. I want to say something about the specific decision to put the phone back. When I found it, I held it for a moment and then I put it back behind the paint can and found my screwdriver and fixed whatever I had been fixing. People ask me why I did not take it immediately, why I did not confront Amy that night. The answer is that taking it would have told Amy it was gone, and a missing phone would have changed her behavior in ways that would have made the subsequent picture harder to build. A risk that is known to the person managing it is a risk that gets managed. I needed to build the picture without Amy knowing I was building it. This is litigator thinking. It is also, as Margaret pointed out, the correct instinct in a situation like this. You do not move before you are ready. You do not reveal your position before you have understood theirs. I want to say something else about the phone, which is harder to say. Finding a prepaid phone in my garage, a phone that had been deliberately hidden, told me something specific about the level of planning that had gone into this. A prepaid phone is not a casual choice. It is chosen by someone who has thought about evidence and decided to create as little as possible. It is the choice of someone who has considered specifically what would happen if they were found out and has taken steps to make that harder. Amy is not a careless person. She had thought about this. She had decided to maintain it. For 22 months, she had maintained something that required that level of deliberate infrastructure. I had to sit with that. The duration and the deliberateness are the 2 things that cost the most to understand. Not because they change the facts are the facts, but because they speak to a sustained choice that was made every day for 22 months. Margaret said something to me near the close of the legal process. She said, "Stephen, I want you to understand something about the cases I handle. Most clients leave this process carrying the injury. A smaller number leave carrying something they have learned. You are in the second group." I said, "What have I learned?" She said, "You have learned to build a case before you make a move. You have learned that your instinct to not be your own counsel was correct. You have learned that the person you were married to was someone whose decisions you could not have predicted or prevented, and you have learned that none of those things are failures on your part." I said, "That last one is the hardest." She said, "It always is." I said, "I'm working on it." She said, "Keep working." My boys are doing well. The 17-year-old starts college in the fall. The 15-year-old has started cooking, teaching himself from videos, which is an approach to learning I respect. He made dinner for me twice last month. Both times it was good. He said, "Is it okay?" I said, "It's really good." He said I just followed the recipe. I said that's how you do most things. Follow the recipe carefully and pay attention when something doesn't match. He said that's a lot of pressure for pasta. I said I believe in you. He almost smiled. Then he went back to the kitchen. The phone is disposed of. The garage is organized. I found my screwdriver. Some things you find when you are looking for something else. You pay attention to what you find. Thank you for being here. Subscribe if you haven't. I'll see you in the next one.